We are going long with an Idaho game warden in this one. Buckle up, friends. There exists a threat, from anti-hunting groups to politicians trying to give our land away, and we won't stand for it. Those vast western landscapes provide the space for our wildlife to thrive, and a place for hunters and anglers to fuel the fire that sparks their soul. In this show, we share our love of hunting, fishing, and conservation. Here, we provide the foundation to meet these threats through passion and the grit of the American outdoorsman. Welcome to the Western Huntsman Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode number 73 on the Western Huntsman Podcast. This is Jim Huntsman, your host, and I'm coming at you from the Broken Tine studio right here in Hayden, Idaho. Looking forward to this episode, guys. I've been working on this one for a while. I've got an Idaho game warden that I'm going to talk about here in just a minute that we bring on, and we do a lot of conversational back and forth about, his career and his background and stuff. But then we get into kind of the nitty-gritty of being a game warden, and so we're going to talk about that. Before we get to that, I do have a few shout-outs I just kind of want to throw out there from some of you listeners and different folks that are making an impact on our show and everything else that we're doing. People that are writing reviews and promoting the show in their own way. I can't thank you guys enough, and I have a hard time sometimes knowing who is doing what, but I can see the impact and the effects of what they're doing from my end. And so if you guys are doing that, again, whether it's just writing a review on like Apple Podcasts or sharing the episodes with your friends or whatever the case is, sending me messages or supporting the show by jumping on the website and buying gear or merchandise or whatever. Guys, thanks a bunch for that. It's been a huge help. We had a record download month in May. May 2021 was, I'd love to say it was by far the most downloaded, or most downloads ever on the show's history. It's not by far, but it was a record-setting month for us, and that is super important for me. I just love seeing the growth. And it's all thanks to you guys out there in the audience that are as passionate about the outdoors and hunting and conservation and everything that we talk about on the show as I am. And so, I just really appreciate it. I want to thank Justin Watson out there listening. I believe he's in Oregon. Sent me a really nice email. Super cool to read that and hear the story behind it. And appreciate you, man. I really appreciate it. I want to thank whoever G_dub is for the latest review on Apple Podcasts. It's funny. The headline says, "He's a drummer." Enough said. That's true, man. I should do a podcast just on drums sometimes. I love talking drums. So I appreciate that there's other people out there that like to talk about the drums. It's always a fun topic for me. So I appreciate the good review, man. Appreciate those 5-star ratings. You guys know that sometimes in our fight against the anti-hunting movement in the community out there, it puts a target on our back, and I notice every once in a while we'll get somebody that slips into the Apple Podcast and gives us like a 1-star review. And I know sometimes where those are coming from because of what's going on with the podcast and stuff, and so it helps if you guys jump on there and counteract that. But anyway, that's G_dub. Don't know what your real name is, man, but I appreciate that review. It was super nice of you. Awesome. I just can't thank you guys enough for that kind of stuff. And Chris Colt, man, if you guys are up in the Sagal, Idaho area and you guys need a stove, a wood stove or chimney sweep or something like that, check out my buddy's company, All About Chimneys. This is not some paid advertisement. It's just people that are they're great people with a great company serving North Idaho for stoves and support a local company. Just great guys over there, man. If you guys are in the area and need that stuff, check them out. All About Chimneys in Sagal, Idaho. That's about 20 minutes north of me. So pretty cool spot. Guys, in this episode, I need to get into a couple of things. So I've got a game warden on, and one thing that's really important as we're rolling into this episode that some of you listeners that are not in Idaho need to understand, like some of the things that we're clarifying regulation-wise are very much specific to Idaho. I'll give you an example. We talk about hunting or where you could take a shot in terms of like being on a roadway. And in Idaho, he lays out, okay, you have to be off the road this much or whatever. You're going to hear how we talk about that. And that's really not what this episode is about. But there are a few things that we talk about. And I know that, Idaho is our most downloaded state. We get the most downloads in Idaho. As of right now, it goes back and forth between Washington and Idaho. But last month, in May, we had the most downloads right here in Idaho. And so I'm just saying this, in the spirit of, obviously, for most of you that have common sense, you're going to know this, but I don't want anybody to miss this point. If you are outside of Idaho, the laws and regulations that we clarify in this episode are not going to pertain to you, and you need to check your own local regulations and stuff like that. And that's again, it's really not what the episode is about. We're really more talking about the lifestyle of being a game warden, and we talk about some of the things that are controversial for game wardens versus hunters, and kind of what the mission of game wardens are, and just conservation officers in general. He throws us a few really good stories as a game warden, things like that. And so on the line today, I've got Steve Roberts, and as I said, he's a game warden right here in Idaho. He's down in kind of southeast Idaho. And Steve is a great dude. He's one of those really committed people to his career. And I think that I bring that up because I always admire people that are like this. And you could find them by the dozens when we're talking about service-oriented, like law enforcement or firefighting or paramedics or teachers. These people that dedicate themselves to a cause that is greater than themselves. And their career isn't necessarily a self-serving career. Nobody's going to get rich being a game warden or a highway patrolman or a teacher. You know what I mean? Nobody's going to get rich on that. But they're doing it out of a greater sense of fulfillment and a sense of duty and commitment to, again, something just greater than themselves. And I always admire that. And so for everybody out there that is in that kind of industry as a career and as a living, we just want to thank you from our podcast, from right here at the Western Huntsman. Thank you guys. You men and women that do that for a living exemplify selflessness. And it's a great thing because, again, nobody's getting rich doing that. There oftentimes comes a lot of danger out of that. We've seen in what has come out of our ever-changing societal norms in the United States of America, we've seen these political implications that play negatively towards our law enforcement, and they don't deserve that. They don't deserve that. And these guys, they put it on the line. And this career is a higher calling for them. This isn't just something that, like in my career, I always think about my career. If you'd asked me when I was 20 years old what I'd be doing at 40 years old, I would have never guessed what I'm doing now. And so it's one of those things where I just kind of fell into it and it works, right? It was an accident. I slipped into this career path that has led me to where I'm at today. And it has worked out fairly well for me. Yeah, I have no complaints with what I do. When we're talking about somebody like Steve, this is like a calling for him. It's a higher calling. It's a duty. It's a sense of pride. It's a sense of commitment and a fulfillment that he sees as his duty to provide for the community of Idaho and, again, to any other law enforcement out there. That's going to be pertinent to your community. And so thank you guys for that. And with Steve, we really get into that side of it, why he wanted to become a game warden, how it fulfills him, how he sees his duty and how he performs his duty. And then we just go all over the place. And he's just a great guy. He's very serious about what he does. He loves what he does. He's very passionate about being a conservation officer. And he loves sharing and educating people and teaching the youngsters in all these things that just make up what amounts to just an individual with great character. And I appreciate that. And so without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. Again, this is Steve Roberts. He is an Idaho game warden. and he has got some stories to tell and some education to send your way. Here we go, guys. This week, guys, I've got my new friend Steve Roberts, who is an Idaho game warden, coming on the show with us, and we're going to talk about all sorts of things that pertain to being a game warden and what hunters and outdoorsmen should know in general. We're going to cover a myriad of topics here, and I'm really excited to have Steve on. I've been working on this one for a while. Steve, I appreciate you coming on the show. Thanks for being here, man.
Yeah, anytime, Jim. I appreciate you having me on the show.
And can you kind of give us an idea of where you're a game warden at?
Yeah, so I'm currently in Mackay, Idaho, out of the Upper Snake region. Mm-hmm. Mackay kind of sits between Salmon and Idaho Falls, is kind of the basic, geographic area.
And you've got what kind of as and we're going to get into a lot of this more in detail down the road, but as a game warden, what kind of territory do you cover personally? Like how many miles?
I've got about, right around 2,000 square miles.
Awesome. Okay. So that kind of puts into perspective 2,000 square miles. Is a lot of country to cover. And that's a tall order for anybody. So I appreciate what you do, first of all. Steve, I know it's kind of one of those jobs that, there's two parties. We either really appreciate what you do and are thankful for you guys being out there, and I think that's the biggest party. And then there's the other party that kind of resents you guys for being out there and doing law enforcement, because they're the ones that want to break all the rules and the laws and everything else, and they're the smaller of the two. But let's face it, they're out there. And so I think that it speaks a lot to the warden service and to law enforcement in general that you're willing to come on the show and discuss some of these topics that we've got kind of planned out here. Can we start it off with giving us your personal background? I'd really like to know, how long have you been a warden? Where are you from? How'd you grow up? And kind of what your motivation to be in law enforcement was. And I know that was a lot I just threw at you, but let's start with where you're from.
Yeah, so I grew up in southwest Idaho. I grew up in Mountain Home. Born and raised in Mountain Home. Lived in the same house my whole life. Went from Mountain Home and got into University of Idaho for the wildlife program.
Up in Moscow?
Yep, up in Moscow. Graduated from UPI, and then was hired as a conservation officer in 2006. So I'm right at 15 years of service.
What as a kid was it like always in your mind? Hey, when I grow up, I want to be a game warden. I want to be a conservation officer.
So I'm one of those guys that had a dream as a kid, and honestly got to live out my dream as an adult. I grew up in I don't want to say the word poor, but my dad did not make a lot of money when I was growing up. We had my mom and dad and 5 kids, and we literally ate and drank hunting, fishing. That was our mainstay for providing food for our family. And that's kind of what started me down the path. It truly was the yellow brick road, if you want to say it that way, that started me on this path to this profession.
Is there just kind of an odd question off topic though? As a conservation officer, so you grew up legitimately as a hunter and a fisherman, just an all around outdoorsman. Which if you're in Mountain Home, I think that's pretty much the norm. Is there nationwide? Is there like some conservation officers that being introduced to hunting and fishing and the outdoors in general, is that like a new concept to them, or is that normal for most wardens to have a background growing up as an outdoorsman? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a large portion of game wardens across the nation have some kind of background in, hunting, fishing, trapping. However, I will also say I have some friends that are dang good officers that didn't hunt, one day growing up. They found a calling. They, found a service related profession, and, their introduction to hunting was, first day on the job, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, it's, the background definitely helps, but it's definitely not necessary.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. I I think that one thing that, like, when I think about, I think about if I could rewind my life and go back and start my, a career again, and knowing what I know now, different career paths that I would take. The one thing that bothers me about becoming a game warden, right, is I feel like it would take a lot of time out of my own personal hunting seasons. Is that the case, or how does that work out?
It definitely does. That's something that a lot of guys and gals don't think about when they enter this job. My busy season is when everybody else is recreating, and the time in field, the time away from family,
Mm-hmm.
does take its toll. There's definitely times that, I wish I could hunt more. I wish I could fish more, but you get around that by, becoming a specialist. Um, I know for the most part, unless I draw some super coveted tag and work out a deal with my neighboring officers, I'm likely not going to have time off in October to try to go, elk hunt.
Mm-hmm.
And so I, through my background, I've got other avenues rather than just rifle elk hunting that I love. And so I started muzzleloader hunting. I started bow hunting, and you become a specialist, and you seek out those seasons that either your general area doesn't have anything going on, or B, you can sneak away for a little bit of time, at the tail end or the very beginning of the season, and still get your licks in.
I guess that makes sense. I guess that's again, when I go back, I always thought it'd be cool, man. I'll be a game warden. I'll go bust people that are poaching and ruining it for every other hunter out there. There was this show when I was still in the service. It was on TV when I was in the service. I was watching this show, and it was about this California game warden, and they were trying to bust these salmon poachers on this river.
Yep.
And he got in a wetsuit and got in the river and swam underwater and grabbed one of the salmon poacher's lines and acted like they were a fish. And when they reeled him in, it was a game warden. He popped up out of the water, and the guy fainted, and he gave him a ticket.
Yep.
Do you know what I'm talking about, that show?
Absolutely. I've seen that many times, and the story, is something of legend,
Yeah. I would
yeah.
love that.
I'll just kind of jump back a little bit and kind of tell you my why. So,
Yeah.
when you say, if I could go back and do things over, catching poachers and this and that is exactly what started me on this path. I'm one of our trainers, here in the region, and I'm what we call an FTO, a field training officer.
Mm-hmm.
So when we get new recruits, I'm one of the guys in the state that is privileged enough to be, their trainer. I get to evaluate them and teach them the ropes, if you will.
Okay.
And I always tell them that, everything in life, we need to have a why. What is your why? And I'm pretty dang proud of my why. My why started when I was 9 years old. Like I told you, my family wasn't very well off, and we hunted a lot. And when I was 9 years old, we had a local game warden there in Mountain Home that over the years truly became one of the strongest mentors I've ever had. When I was 9 years old, we were at the local gas station, and in the back of his truck was two dead, bloated elk,
Mm.
and they were missing their heads. And, me being a little kid and my dad being friendly with the local game warden, he said, what's going on there? And we were told that those two elk were poached and their heads were taken. And that's the only thing that they took. And I remember, very vividly looking at my dad and telling Dad, those elk could have fed our family. And
Seriously.
on that day, I told my dad that when I grow up, I'm going to be a game warden so that I can help stop that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my why.
That's a great why. That's a great motivation, because that is a taking yourself out of your own personal net gain, right? And you're turning it into what is the best thing for the greater good, and how do I serve a community outside of just myself? Yeah. And that's the thing. Whether it's a game warden or you're a firefighter or a policeman, whatever kind of service oriented industry in that one thing that people, especially in like the political climate of today, what people don't realize is your job in the service of others and for the greater good. There's a community sense to that people that spend their whole lives in some kind of job where it's just and only self-serving.
Sure.
There's a big difference there. And I'm not saying that's bad, because I'm in a job where it is mainly, I'm not in a service-oriented day job, right? That's not what I do for a living. And I'm not saying that's selfish, and I'm not saying anything. So any of you out there sitting there writing this down, waiting to send me a nasty email, just save it, because that's not what I'm talking about. What it is, though, when somebody is in law enforcement and they're a game warden and they're a policeman and they're a highway patrolman or a firefighter or a paramedic and all these services that provide for our community, this is for the greater good. It's not like they pay you guys, all this money to do what you do. There's a higher level of fulfillment that I've noticed with all my friends that do this for a living that I don't think gets recognized enough. And so I want you to know, from like our platform and my standpoint, we recognize that and we appreciate that, and because it's you guys are the tip of the spear in terms of our defense for our lifestyle of hunting and outdoors, or being an outdoorsman. We need that protection in order for this to be sustainable, and a lot of people don't see it that way. And it brings me to a question for you, Steve. Like, now you've been doing this for 15, 16 years, however many years we're into this now. I guess 15, huh? You said 2006?
Yep.
Is it what you thought it would be? And is that level of the fulfillment side of being a conservation officer, is that fulfilled, or is it a lot different than what you thought it would be?
It is that much and so much more. Don't get me wrong. We all have bad days, right? But, as a conservation officer, I truly believe I have the greatest job on earth. We have a lot of friends and we make a few enemies, but so does everybody else, right? We're out here to do a job. We're just general, regular old guys and gals that love wildlife. Whether it's, I love it all. I'm on a group that records bumblebee sightings because, our pollinators are so important to everything on the landscape.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
That I literally go from, bumblebees to moose, and I get to work with all of them. And that's the stuff that's so fulfilling, doing the surveys, doing the side work, if you will. As a game warden, I'm not 100% law enforcement. We're out there helping with, trapping deer, radio collaring elk, doing fish surveys and sage grouse surveys, lek routes, everything that the department does, we do get to participate in, and that's the stuff that truly is, as we say, we get paid to do things that people would pay to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And when I mean, all that being said, and everything that you've covered kind of answers this in a way, but I kind of wanted the audience to be able to take away some clarity, because I think there's some misunderstanding out there in terms of what the mission of the Warden service is. And can you kind of help broaden the definition or explain to people listening that may not be super familiar with this, like, what is the mission of the Warden service? So what is the point of having conservation officers out there?
Sure. So my bureau, the enforcement ranks, is just one of the several groups that make up the overall Idaho Department of Fish and Game, right? We call them bureaus. So we are in the Enforcement Bureau. We've got fisheries, we've got wildlife, we've got communications, we've got habitat. We're just a faction of the overall group. That overall group, Idaho Department of Fish and Game, is charged with protecting the wildlife of the state of Idaho. And that our mission statement is actually, written in Idaho law. And in short, it says preserve, protect, perpetuate, and manage the wildlife of the state of Idaho for its residents, for the future of hunting, fishing, and trapping.
Gotcha.
So that is, in a nutshell, without actually reading, the mission from paper. Our mission is to protect, preserve, perpetuate, and manage all wildlife for the citizens of the state.
And on that note, Steve, what is like some misconceptions or misunderstandings that hunters have specifically about game wardens or some of the laws that you're enforcing? And I asked this, kind of what I was telling you before we started recording. I asked this of a lot of kind of niche guests that I'm having on the show. There's got to be misunderstandings out there that you see on social media or elsewhere. What people say to you about what the game wardens do, what their mission is, or things like that. Is there something you can comment on in that regard?
Sure. I hear it quite often, and unfortunately, most of the time that I hear it, it's not from the general public. It's from those folks that are, sitting, waiting to receive a citation, but, we hear it quite often. Well, you guys are just out here enjoying writing people tickets.
And that's generating revenue, right?
That's exactly right. You got a quota to fill, and you're just out here taking money from the taxpayers of the state. And that couldn't be further from the truth. We don't have any kind of quota system. There's no, we don't have any evaluation based off the number of tickets you write. This is obviously just me speaking, but I can speak for the group. The best days that I have are those that I go out and I talk to 50, 60, 70 people. And every contact has been, hey, I appreciate you guys being out here. Thanks for, having all your licenses and everything in a row. Have a great day.
Yeah.
A lot of times the harder parts of the job is writing somebody a citation. That's not what we get our enjoyment out of. We get our enjoyment out of watching people enjoy the wildlife and the, and the nature that we have, the outdoors that we have here in Idaho. That's our enjoyment.
Now, I would totally agree with that, except for if I was that California game warden that snuck in the water and pretended like I was a salmon getting reeled in. I would get a lot of enjoyment out of writing that guy a ticket.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. There are some violations that you work long and hard to try to make that case.
Yeah,
and there is definitely a fulfillment at the end of the rainbow. But it's not a personal joy per se. It's a satisfaction that you put in the time and caught somebody that truly is a poacher.
So it's like this sense of justice you've got.
Absolutely. Yeah. We are protecting the resource for the people of Idaho.
Yeah. Yeah, I dig it, man. I love that stuff. I think that's great, because that's like you said, some of the misconceptions. I've heard all this A million times. Oh, you're just out here trying to write me a ticket for not having a fishing license, so you guys can get your commission on how many tickets you wrote. I don't know of any law enforcement agency on the planet that gets a paid commission for writing tickets, but I've heard that multiple times. I don't understand where that comes from.
So a little bit of history, and I can't say that this is where that came from, but so we way back in the day, 19, I can't remember the exact year, 1902, 1905.
Way back there.
Way back. They hired the first game warden. And he was the only one for the whole state. Charles Arbuckle, I think, if I remember right, was his name. He was the warden for the entire state.
Mm-hmm.
And he was allowed to hire deputy game wardens. They worked under him. And their pay came from, they received half of the fines for every citation that they wrote.
Gotcha.
So, yes, at one point, 115
years ago, yeah, yep.
Yeah, there was, that stuff going on.
Sure.
But at the same time, that same time frame, the cost of a hunting license was $1.
Mm-hmm.
$1 for a resident, $5 for a non-resident. So, and the same is true today, right? Every time I hear that, well, you're just out here, trying to take my money. Well, that $25 license is vastly cheaper than you taking a day off to go visit with a judge and pay the fine for the violation.
Yeah, exactly. That's the kicker of the whole thing. Like the licenses, especially for a resident, they're just not that much money.
Yeah, but we still write those tickets weekly. It still happens, quite often.
What's the most common thing that sportsmen get cited for?
So it really changes with the season. Right now, with really the only thing going on, bear season, salmon steelhead season on some years, fishing season in general, we get quite a few bear bait violations and a lot of fishing violations, whether that be fishing without a license, using bait where you're not supposed to have bait, fishing in an artificial section of the river with bait. Those are the things that we see this time of the year. As it transitions into the fall, the most common hunting violations, probably tagging violations improperly or, just not correctly, or a lot of times simply not putting a tag on an animal.
Mm-hmm.
Evidence of sex is fairly common. It's actually one of them that I would say is probably the most common violation in the fall is evidence of sex.
Do you have a simplified explanation for hunters that don't know how to quite do that properly to explain to them how you do that, how you leave the evidence of sex on when you're hauling out an elk and you've got it quartered out?
Sure. Yeah. So I play the game of extra chances. So when I quarter out my elk, I leave a testicle or a piece of the mammary attached to each one of the hindquarters. Yes, it takes a little bit more time, but there's been multiple times that even I am, packing out meat. You shove it in a bag, you get it in your pack. You're going out a mile and a half or more, and things come off. They get tore off, or a lot of times, honestly, what happens is a guy gets caught in the moment. I got to get this thing skinned. I got to get this thing quartered, and they get the quarters pulled off, and it's like, ooh, forgot to leave that on there. Well, now it's too late. So the biggest thing is just take a little bit of time and make sure that you get it correct. It doesn't have to be a testicle. It doesn't have to be a mammary. A lot of guys will leave, and I've done this with some of the smaller animals, the penile cord, the penis comes from between the legs and it follows right directly between the two hindquarters.
Mm-hmm.
You can leave that attached to one of the hindquarters. When you're splitting the pelvis, just leave a chunk of that, penile tissue right to the side of the hindquarter. When you get home and you're getting, things ready to get processed, then you can just whack that off.
Yeah, it's super easy.
It is, and it's one of those things that I think 90% of the time folks just get in a hurry and you don't think about it until it's already gone, and once it's no longer attached, now to be compliant with the law, we got to do something different, which now means that you're either, on an antlerless animal, at least you've got, a couple different teats that you can, maybe salvage something to leave attached, or you're, packing out the head and neck to make sure that it, stays attached to a portion of the carcass.
Gotcha. And that's probably one of the more common things you're out there and you see and you're having to cite people for.
Yeah. And, one thing for folks to understand, a citation definitely doesn't always happen. We have warnings, and the vast majority of violations on a scale wide system are dealt with a lot of times with just a couple warnings. That it doesn't mean that the violation didn't occur. What I tell folks is when you receive a warning, we're using this as an educational experience so it doesn't happen again in the future.
Mm-hmm. I think that's super important. I feel like Steve, if we wanted to get funny, we could do a whole podcast episode on how to get out of a citation.
Sure.
Or even having like a highway patrolman, how to get out of a speeding ticket. Because, what I've found in my experience in the past, it has always been, of course, I've never really had any hunting violations, right? It's always been like I do speed, and I've had my fair share of tickets, and my insurance rates reflect that. So I don't recommend it, but either way, and regardless, I'm always polite and I'm always respectful. And one thing that you have over me as a career law enforcement guy like yourself is you have to have a lot more patience for the general public as what I could provide. I don't know if it was my time in the Marines or just the nature of my personality. I have little patience for people that are disrespectful, they don't have manners, and they feel like they're just entitled to come up and ruin it for everybody else. Man, sure. I'd be throwing people against a truck and putting cuffs on them and dragging them behind it. No, I wouldn't say that, but I just have not a lot of patience for that kind of stuff, and I feel like manners go a long ways, and we're lacking that in today's society. I don't know. Maybe it's just something that's bothers me and doesn't bother anybody else.
Yeah, no, I think you're right on. I mean, we, like I said earlier, we make a lot of friends. On an overall basis, it's somewhere around 10% of the folks that we interact with have a violation present. Mm-hmm. So, on a day-to-day basis, if I check, 50 people, I might find, 2 or sometimes 3 violations. And most of those violations are, minor violations. It's not that common, to have a series of major violations unless you just happen to, get some really good information, put in a fairly extensive, amount of work, and get a group of folks that are purposely breaking the law caught. On a day-to-day basis, it's pretty minor stuff that we're running into. Some of it is, minor enough that you get a warning and we have a chat. Some of it is, still minor, but is dealt with, by an infraction, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and some of it is a little bit more serious, and you end up with a misdemeanor and a court date.
Yeah.
But overall, one of the things that I tell all of the hunter ed the hunter ed classes that we teach is honesty goes a long ways. We're all human.
Sure.
Just because I'm a game warden doesn't mean that I haven't messed up, right? I've got speeding tickets before. You get in situations where a person makes a mistake,
Mm-hmm.
and mistakes happen. The problem, though, is that mistake happens, and then people try to cover it. They try to hide it. They try to deal with it instead of being honest about it. And that's when a warning just simply isn't going to suffice, because it's no longer a mistake. Now it's a crime.
Yeah, because if they're not admitting the mistake, it becomes this thing where, okay, I can get away with doing this in the future. Where versus if you just say, hey, you know what, I screwed up, I didn't do this, or I failed to do this, and I'm not going to let it happen again. I think that goes a long way, and that just speaks to general character as well.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Can I ask you a clarifying question that I can't seem to find, and maybe it's just because, I've never been accused of being super smart, but I have a clarifying question. You had mentioned bear baiting and bear baiting citations. Let's say you've got two guys and they're friends, and one's got a barrel set here and one's got a bait barrel set down there. Does both hunters have to have a bait tag on that specific barrel, or could they trade off and say, hey, I've got a bear hitting it here, why don't you go hit that one tonight and I'll go hit yours tomorrow? Does that make sense?
It does. And this is one of them that we actually get asked quite a bit. This is not something new. So the bait permit gives you the opportunity to place bait. Okay, and that's the important clarifier here. Mm-hmm. The placement of the bait is what is regulated. Okay, so
gotcha.
If you both have bait permits and you're sharing responsibilities of baiting both of those sites, you both need to have a permit.
You both need to have the permit. So the person sitting on that bait needs to have a baiting tag permit.
So no. So that's the...
Oh, I misunderstood.
Yeah, that's the kicker here. So the placement of the bait, not the actual person hunting it, but who is placing the bait at that site. So that's the one thing that I think a lot of people kind of don't, it's a struggle. They don't really understand it.
Yeah, and that makes sense. Oh, go ahead. I cut you off there. Sorry.
No, what I'm saying is, if me and you are both running a couple bait sites together, mm-hmm. If you have a bait permit and I do not, right? You buy a bait permit, you get your 3 site tags.
Mm-hmm.
So you go up, you place the barrel, you place your bait. It's got the tag. You're correct distance away from the road, the water. All of those things, it's 100% legal. But then you ask me, hey, I'm not going to be able to run up there this weekend. Can you run this bait up there for me? As soon as I pour that bucket of bait in the barrel, I have broken the law because I don't have a bait permit.
Gotcha. That helps me. Okay.
It's the placement of the bait, not the actual hunting of the bait.
Okay, that actually, I told you I wasn't very smart, Steve. I hope you're picking up on this, but that makes sense. So I've got a buddy coming to hunt from out of town. I'm going to be the one putting the bait in the barrels and hunting, but he's also going to hunt them when he gets here. But I'll be the one always putting the bait in, and that is legal.
Yeah, as long as it's a legal bait site,
gotcha.
He can hunt that bait, without any other permits necessary. Just has to have, the bear tag.
See, that's the kind of stuff I worry about as a hunter, that it's, I do my due diligence. I read the proclamation when it comes out. I try to keep up with all these different things, and it gets really complex when you're a guy like me who hunts multiple species in multiple different states. It's really difficult to keep up with everything, especially when you don't have the brains that most people do. And for me, I feel like I have to work harder because I'm not smart enough. You know what I mean? And so it gets complex. And that's the kind of little detail stuff that I always worry about. Like, oh man, did I do that right? Did I do that wrong? How do I clarify that? And sometimes I don't know who writes the proclamation, Steve, but sometimes they are super, super vague. And it's like, what does that mean? Because that can be interpreted a couple of different ways. So anyways, that's I think where I get a little bit nervous on things like that. And that kind of leads me to this next kind of line of questioning here. But we were talking before I hit record, and I wanna bring up a point that you had made about how important it is that the public is there to help be like this enforcement multiplier and helping with regulation compliance, things like that. Because you said, like, for you cover 2,000 square miles. And I'm sure that that's pretty typical throughout the American West, whether you're in Arizona or Idaho. There's not the numbers of law enforcement conservation officers out there to be able to kind of keep an eye on everything, right? And so can you speak to how important it is that the public is there and has your back?
Yeah, absolutely. So here in Idaho, we have 105 field officers for the entire state. And that number hasn't changed in, quite some time. Our patrol areas are, as you probably well know, anybody from Idaho knows, the terrain is vastly different in the Owyhees versus the St. Joe, right? So our patrol areas are vastly different. The smallest patrol area in the state is somewhere around 450 square miles. And the biggest one, I honestly don't know the number off the top of my head, but I'm going to say, 2,800 square miles, or maybe even a little bigger. And the difference is, general population base, really. Those smaller patrol areas have a larger number of people. They have a larger number of opportunities. So, year-round fishing seasons, long hunting seasons with a lot of people, you're not going to be able to cover more than what that patrol area gives you. A couple of our officers that have, backcountry wilderness, we have, a couple officers that, share half of the Frank Church, and, they're only able to do their job either by landing in an airstrip, riding a horse or mule, or jumping in a raft or a jet boat and, running the river system. And so we have vastly different areas, but the one thing that we all deal with is trying to be everywhere at once. Me personally, like I said, I've got around 2,000 square miles. I can't cover my entire patrol area in a week, let alone, a couple days. The other thing that all of us deal with is, communication. There's about 40% of my patrol area that I have no communication outside of satellite phone or satellite, texting, in-reach, spot type things. So there are definitely times that I don't even know something's happening until 2 days later. So one of the things that we always talk about with Hunter Ed, and we talk about at our sportsman shows, and we talk about at, public events, the sporting public is our force multiplier. As I said earlier, the vast majority, 90+% of our sportsmen are law-abiding, nature-loving folks that want to make sure that their kids have the same opportunity that they have. And that only happens by continued regulation compliance.
Yeah.
So the public is so vastly important for us to make sure that when things are bad, we learn about it. A lot of times those big giant cases that I was, talking about earlier, those cases start by one guy or one gal that calls in and says, "Hey, I don't know if this is anything, but it seemed kind of fishy and I want you to know about it." And the next thing you know, we're, doing search warrants and doing, multiple felony wildlife crimes because of a call from the public that they didn't even know if it was a big deal.
Yeah, yeah. If you're anything like me, hunting is a year-round thing for you, and we're always thinking about how to make our next upcoming season a little bit better, and one way to do that is with gear. And you guys know I'm not a big gear junkie, but I do have some important gear items that I'm always a huge fan of, and they're right here available on this show. Let's talk about Scree gear. Scree is my go-to camo. Scree is high-performance hunting attire and gear, scientifically tested camo patterns, and all backed by a great company, and I wouldn't recommend it to you if I didn't truly believe in the Scree product. They've got a complete layering system for all terrain and conditions, gear designed to adapt to the weather. It's rugged gear. It's got a lifetime warranty, VIP sizing and exchange program. You can't go wrong with Scree. Get the best out there without breaking the bank, and to make it even better, use promo code The Western Huntsman for 15% off and free shipping. Hell of a deal. Check it out at ScreeGear.com. Next on the list is my oldest and fondest sponsor of the show is Phelps Game Calls. One thing I love about companies like Phelps Game Calls is the American success story that came out of it. And Phelps started in Jason Phelps' garage years ago, and it's now one of the premier hunting call companies on the market, and I wouldn't point you in that direction if I didn't feel like they were the best calls available. Jump on PhelpsGameCalls.com. When you find a call you like, use promo code Huntsman10 for 10% off. I promise you, you will not regret it. Hoffman Boots. Hoffman Boots is a go-to boot company I've been using for years and years and years. And the cool thing about it is I'm only on my second pair of Hoffman Explorers. I put lots of miles on my Hoffman Explorers. They're a great boot. They're not going to cost you a small fortune to get. And they have all the same guarantees and warranties that every other company out there has. If you want to be confident, guys, do not skimp on boots. Go to HoffmanBoots.com. Get you a pair of, for me, I like the 8-inch Explorers, but they also have the 6-inch. They have all sorts of different options. Check it out at HoffmanBoots.com and use promo code Huntsman10, all caps lock, for 10% off. And last but not least is Tacticam. Are you interested in filming your hunt? And are you interested in helping with conservation efforts throughout the North American continent? Well, then I got a deal for you. Tacticam is a point-of-view type kind of camera that records in 4G. They also have other products like the Film Through Scope, the FTS, and you attach that to your rifle scope and you can film your shot right there. And they have the mounts for your shoulder, for your head. You can mount it to your bow. You can mount it to wherever and whatever you want. Lots of versatility with the Tacticam. Other products include, but are not limited to, the fisheye camera. The Tacticam Spotter LR is definitely worth a look if you want to film what you're seeing through your glass while you're actively hunting and get it on camera. It's a great thing. But I think that the thing that I'm most excited about with Tacticam this year is the new Reveal cell cam that is coming out. This trail camera will send you images in real time as they're coming in. They've got like an enhanced antenna for better service. If you're like managing property or something like that, or you've got a bear bait set up somewhere that you have phone service, you can get those pictures right there to your phone. This cell cam is super, super cool. I'm really excited about it. And you can get all this at thewesternhuntsman.com/gear. Go to the gear shop. You'll find all the Tacticam stuff right there. Best pricing out there on it. And what happens is we split the profitable revenue from these sales of the Tacticam gear, and half of it goes to conservation efforts, which vary depending on what quarter of the year it is. Right now we're raising money and trying to get some money over to Sportsmen's Alliance. It's a great cause, and that is what's going to go down when you shop for Tacticam gear at thewesternhuntsman.com. So go over there and check it out and get you a camera. Guys, let's get back into it. I sure appreciate it. Can I expand on a point you made? Would you mind?
Absolutely.
Because I think this is an important topic, and I don't think it gets enough airtime or attention out there. It starts with a story when, without, I'm always running the risk of sounding like my grandpa when I say, well, back when I was in the Marines, right? But
Yeah.
There's something to this. When I was in the Marines, and I'd only been in for 6 months, maybe 10 months, I can't remember. We were brand new to the Marine Corps. I'm still in like infantry school out in California. And two Marines that I had no idea who they were, I didn't know, whatever, they go out into the desert. I can't remember if it was California or possibly Nevada, but either way, they shot 2 wild horses. And this is a big no-no, right? They go out and they shoot 2 wild horses. They probably got drunk and were out there horsing around, messing around, and shot 2 wild horses. Well, this created some serious national headlines. And we had one of our, within the leadership of the Marine Corps, it's super complicated. It's like a cobweb of different, echelons and whatever. This older Marine that was talking to us about this incident, because it was all over like I said, it was all over the national news. There's headlines: 2 Marines go out and poach wild horses in Nevada or wherever it was. And what this person told us really makes sense, and it really applies in this situation is, you can have 90% or even 90% of the Marines that go out there, they represent us well. They give us a good name. They wear their uniforms the right way. They follow the laws. They don't drink and drive. They do things that represent our country and our nation and our Marine Corps in a very positive light. And then all that work that goes into that kind of reputation building gets shattered by 2 Marines that go out and break the law and shoot a couple of wild horses. Because that's what the headline is. If it was a couple of civilians that went out and shot wild horses, it would have barely made the news. But because it was 2 Marines, 2 active duty Marines, they went out there and got all these negative headlines shined right on the Marine Corps, and the entire Marine Corps suffered because of it. The point I'm trying to make here is this concept applies to hunters and outdoorsmen, because when we get poachers and they go out there and they shoot a big bull moose somewhere and it becomes a headline, they don't, almost never do they report it as a poacher went out and shot a big moose out of season. No, it's always hunter goes out and poaches a bull moose out of season without a tag, and it's poaching. And poaching is not hunting. But to the general public, for those folks that are not hunters and they're not generally, they're not anti-hunters, they're not pro-hunters, they're just the general public, the vast majority of the population in the United States, that's these people. They read that, and the entire hunting community gets painted with this negative light. Yeah. And so as hunters, to your point, the importance of us self-enforcing the laws and the regulations that are set forth, because our game wardens can't be everywhere, is critical to the future of hunting. And that's why I wanted to shed it upon that light. And I appreciate you giving me a few minutes there.
No, and that couldn't be more true, Jim. That is exactly on point with, the way things are, perceived, right? Perception is reality for most of our general public.
Great point. Yep.
The headline never says, poacher cited for this. It's Idaho hunter, Indiana hunter cited for 42 violations.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's not a hunter. That's a poacher.
A poacher is not a hunter. That's a great point, Steve.
We have different levels of violations, and once you get to that, that level, that it's no longer, you made a mistake, or you misinterpreted the law, or, some of the other things, you're in a situation that you feel that you had to provide for your family.
Yeah.
Right. That's, obviously that's a poaching, right? But it's not the same.
It's not the same. Yeah. Go ahead.
It's not the same as somebody that's going out and shooting multiple animals and taking the antlers and the antlers alone for their ego.
Oh, that stuff
right?
drives me crazy. It drives me crazy.
Yeah. There's a means, and let's be honest, wildlife trade is big money.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason that game wardens have so much job security. Wildlife trade is a very active, business. The black market trade is an active business for a lot of different wildlife parts, whether that be the pet trade or the antler trade or, whatever. There are people that their only concern is monetary gain, and that's a poacher. That's not somebody that's out there hunting.
Yeah, that's a big difference between carrying on your family heritage of filling the freezer with venison. And I didn't know that, Steve. So that's like a big deal, like this black market thing that you're talking about.
Yeah, in different parts of the country and different types of wildlife parts, there can be some serious monetary gain.
Yeah, that's crazy. I didn't know that. Sorry, I hit my mute button there on accident. Whoops, there. Anyway, I think that's a good like segue point to kind of contrast what we're talking about, because I totally agree. There is a big difference between somebody who is too lazy to pinch your fish hook so that you have a barbless hook versus somebody that's out there shooting 3 bachelored up bucks in the middle of July to get their antlers, right?
Yeah.
And I agree with that. Neither one is right, but there is a big difference. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the repercussions of doing both of those are vastly different as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm glad we made that point. The one thing that is always kind of a hot topic, and I have opinions on this, is the topic of setting poaching decoys and how it pertains to law enforcement, how you guys as wardens view this. And I want to kind of tell just a quick story on this topic. My little brother and I, we go hunting. We're down in Utah, and we're hunting. We take 10 days. And we go out and we spent all this money to get all the gear and the groceries and enough beer, obviously, right? As hunters, you always got to have at least a minimal amount of beer in camp.
Yeah.
But so we go down and we're hunting Utah. We're hunting mule deer. And we spend 10 days working our tails off. And this is years and years ago, long before it was even feasible for us to even think we can afford a 10-day hunt. Because it was just way out of our price range, but we did it, and we bust our tails. We're out there getting our teeth kicked in. We deal with bad weather. We deal with crowded mountains. We deal with all these things. Neither one of us end up tagging out. We pack up. I had this 1966 15-foot trailer that I was pulling. I bought it for $500 when I was in my early 20s, just out of the Marines, and I pulled this thing all over the place. So we pack up camp, we're on our way out, and I'm driving, and he's in the passenger seat, and it gets dark, and we're still on the dirt road, and I come around this corner, and my headlights shine on the biggest whitetail buck I've ever seen in my life, and he's about 30 yards off the road, and I slam on the brakes, and I just sit there and stare at it. My little brother looks over at me, and he reaches back behind the seat and grabs his rifle, and I'm staring at this buck, and I'm just thinking, man, that is a big buck for this area. And he's about to jump out, and as he's doing that, I'm thinking, after all this work that we put in, this is a pretty interesting little opportunity, right? Keep in mind, I'm in my 20s.
Yep.
Little brother goes to jump out, and then all of a sudden it hit me. I grabbed him, and I said, don't shoot at that buck. Do not shoot that buck. Because what hit me is I'm in Utah. They do not have whitetail in Utah, other than maybe one stray that'll run through every once in a while. But for the most part, it is a mule deer state only. And this is a big whitetail buck, like the kind you find in Iowa or something. It's just ridiculous big. And we sit there and stare at it. And so I put the truck in park, and I get out, And I go running up to it like I'm going to give it, throw it in a headlock and wrestle it down on the ground or something, messing around. And these lights come on, and these game wardens are, hey, get back in your truck and get out of here. And so we get out. We leave. All is good. No shots were fired. But the thought did cross my mind as somebody who just busted their tail, spent a bunch of time in the woods, spent a bunch of money that I really didn't have to spend, this huge, enticing buck that would be a dream for any hunter is right in front of us. I know what's behind. That's a safe shot, but it's dark and it's illegal. And I knew it was illegal, but the enticement was still there. And I kind of want to get your take as to why that happens in a way, and explain to people that say you're creating a crime that wouldn't happen if that decoy wasn't set. Does that make sense how I asked that?
Yeah.
I kind of went all over the place, so I apologize about that. But I want to have that discussion for clarification.
Yeah. So the one, again, I'm in the job of wildlife protection, right? So when you say what would have happened if that whitetail buck wasn't there? Well, what if it wasn't a whitetail? What if it was a live, 100% live 3-point mule deer?
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of times that deer ends up getting shot. And that's a loss of a resource for the citizens of the state. That deer was taken illegally.
Because it was dark. It was still seasoned, but it was dark. And it was our last day.
Yep, that's exactly right. So, in Idaho, we have, very specific times, half an hour before sunrise till half an hour after sunset, right? That's the law. So decoys in general. So again, your individual perspective was they put that deer there to try to get me to shoot it. Correct. And you're right, we did. But what you don't have is the background. Why was that spot chosen? Decoys are definitely used, right? We have decoys of various forms and fashions around the state, around the country. There's all different kinds of decoys. But the reason, at least for us here in Idaho, that we use those is because we receive multiple complaints of people hunting after dark. We have multiple complaints of landowners with trespass issues. We have there's a background, right?
So it's not just a random thing where you're like, let's go cruise down this dirt road and set a decoy.
That is exactly right. So for me to set a decoy, I have to get permission from my supervisor, who has to get permission from his supervisor, to make sure that what we're doing is in the best interest of the public. We don't just drive around with a decoy in the back of the truck like, that looks like a good spot, let's throw it out. We have a reason for throwing a decoy. And I'll give you an example.
Okay.
So in a couple different patrol areas, we have unit boundaries with different seasons.
So like, Unit 4 backs up to Unit 5, and the season is this date, and the Season 5 is a different date. That's kind of what you're implying there.
Yeah. So on one side of the road, maybe it's a controlled hunt only, and a general hunt on the right side of the road, right? Or you have two general units that back up to each other, but one unit closes, say, on the 24th, and one unit is open for another week and closes on the 31st.
Mm-hmm.
We start to receive complaints about guys shooting deer on the wrong side of the road, or, the wrong side of the ridge line. And those complaints are, used to ask for justification to run a decoy. Case in point, one of my previous patrol areas, we had a controlled hunt on the left side of the road. The north side of the road is a controlled hunt only,
mm-hmm.
with a limited number of tags, a very sought after, hard to draw unit. On the right side of the road is a general unit. any antlered buck. Well, the road is what separates the two. And you start to get complaints about guys shooting deer on the controlled hunt side of the road and then dragging them across the road, throwing a general tag on them, and they're out of there in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So you start to build that investigation, and at some point you talk to the supervisor and say, hey, I'd like to throw a decoy up and see if we can, verify that this is actually happening. So we go throw a decoy up, and it either gets shot or it doesn't. Most of the time you're sitting on the hillside freezing your butt off and nothing happens. And again, that's a great day, right? No rules were broken. I've had lots of people jump out of their truck and take pictures of them. You're sitting on the hillside and you hear the voice come out of the truck. Oh, it's so cute. And those things happen. And then the very next vehicle comes by, they slam on their brakes, and a gun comes out the driver's window, a gun comes out the back passenger's window, and shots start to ring out.
Yeah. While
sitting in their vehicle in the middle of the road. And it's, that's the stuff that we're trying to stop.
You have to be, and just like, for people, it depends on what state you're in, but like in Idaho, you have to be, is it 20 yards off the road, or do you just have to be on the shoulder? I can never remember.
You just have to be off of all maintained portions of the road, right? Any maintained portion of the road. So that includes, gravel top, blacktop, and, borrow ditches, any of it that's maintained. In some of that North Idaho stuff, you guys, got the big steep ridge lines. That whole cut bank that they have to cut off to make the road go through that spot, that whole cut bank is considered maintained portion of the road.
Yeah, yeah.
So
no, that's good. I think people need that clarification, seriously, because I've seen things the last few years.
Yeah, and different parts of the state have different cultures. The North Idaho country up there, you've got so many roads that it's pretty conducive for driving around looking for deer from the truck.
You say that, but it's like, I don't know how people do that. I never see deer from the truck because we've got mainly whitetail. If we had a bunch of mule deer up here, I could see, okay, road hunting could be pretty good, but for whitetail, I just never see them from the road. I mean, rarely do I see a buck from the road. You'll see a whitetail doe running, that big white flag up going behind her.
Yeah, sure.
So anyway, it's all interesting, and it's all it kind of going back to this point that we're all out there as hunters, and we're needing to be this full force multiplier to help you guys with the regulation and compliance. And I think that's the biggest pushback thing that I've heard from people is people don't like this whole decoy setup thing because they think that they're taking somebody that wouldn't normally create or commit a crime of poaching, and they're putting him in a circumstance where it is being created. And the bottom line is it does boil down to that individual making that decision, right? Like you were talking about with those units where the road is separating a draw unit from, just a general unit or whatever the case is. And it's really difficult to prove. Well, they could say, oh, I shot it on this side of the road. Nobody saw me. Well, when you do have these decoy things, that's kind of where it's creating, the actual hard proof that that's what happened, right? And I don't know if I'm articulating that the right way because I'm trying to read as I'm talking here on some of these other questions I got for you.
You're good. So what the one I guess to try to clarify it, a little further. So again, when it comes to after dark stuff, right? We get calls about spotlighting all the time, and yes, there are times where a game warden can go out and see a light and catch somebody spotlighting.
Mm-hmm.
But if we start to get these reports, the chances of catching somebody with a dead deer are difficult.
Mm-hmm.
right?
No,
It is difficult. You're
yeah.
following somebody around in the dark, hoping that they see a deer. Not hoping's not a good word either, but you're
Well, I
trying.
mean, if you're out there trying to do law enforcement things, I know what you mean. I know what you mean. I've never been in law enforcement. I've been in the military where there was this sense of I hope that I can apply the training that I'm learning, right?
Sure.
So I know where you're coming from. So you don't need to justify that.
Yeah. The the solid proof sometimes is easier to obtain if we put a decoy up and allow those violators to come to us, right? We don't
Mm-hmm.
have to try to find that needle in a haystack, if you will. We get some reports. Hey, 2 days in a row, I've seen a spotlight up in this canyon, or last week I saw a spotlight on this ridge line. We're going to take a chance on them coming back to that spot. And we throw a decoy out, and those are the folks, especially when you start talking about nighttime stuff and spotlighting and, depending on where you're at in the country, jacklighting and,
Yeah. Yeah.
those words that we all use for use of artificial light.
Yeah.
That's not a hunter. They're out there for the sole purpose to cheat the citizens of the state from an animal.
Yeah.
They're stealing that wildlife from you as an ethical, responsible hunter.
I'll give the listeners a really good example of what we're talking about and tying it into being helping the conservation officers out there with regulation compliance. I have a really close friend of mine. His name is Knox. Really cool name. I love the name Knox, right? And his name's Knox, but he's a stickler for rules. And we need more people like him out there in this particular case. So where he was working, he had this guy come in to work, and they're all working in the same kind of. They filled like it was this weird carcinogenic gas kind of plant. They filled all these weird gases in these tanks and stuff. Anyway, beside the point, some dude comes in one morning after elk season. He's bragging about how he tried to find an elk and did all this stuff, but was driving at nighttime and actually shot an elk from the road at night because the elk was kind of mesmerized in his headlights. And he said it was his nice big 6-point. And so Knox let him finish the story, and he let him kind of tell everybody and be all braggadocious about it. And what he didn't realize is Knox pulled him aside after he was telling the whole group around the morning coffee station this story. Knox says, "So, are you gonna call the warden and let him know that you poached an elk at night, or do you want me to? Because those are your choices."
Yeah.
And that's what we're talking about. That guy should never have shot an elk at dark. And there's a ton of reasons why. And we could talk about that for an entire podcast episode. But we all know that. We're all grown-ups for the most part. Maybe there's a few kids out there listening, but we're all grown-ups. We all know why you don't shoot at night. We all know why those rules are in place. We all know why we need to enforce ourselves and make sure that doesn't happen. And the guy chose, in this case, the guy chose not to call. So Knox did call. And people could roll their eyes and say, well, he's a tattletale. Well, is he? Or is he protecting the future of hunting? Because that's what we're talking about. Remember when you brought up and I brought up the fact that 90% of hunters, they do it the right way, but it's that 10% that sheds a bad light. It's that 10% that are going to kill it for the 90% of us. And that's why we self-enforce.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
We've been on these tough topics for a minute. Let's wrap this up. I want to hear some cool game warden stories, which, by the way, Steve, is there a way, if I'm down in your neck of the woods and you're going to be setting a decoy, can I go with you? Can I tag along? Or is that illegal?
We have had some folks come along in the past, but just simply due to the circumstances of nighttime operations, setting up decoys, to catch known violators.
Mm-hmm.
The people that we have that come along, as far as I've, ever had somebody not a conservation officer on scene, have always been a law enforcement officer. one of the county deputies that wants to come along and just witness, what we do on a decoy set. And, again, that's just, it's a safety thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
My job, I love everything that I do, but there are times that we have to take action, even if that means putting ourselves in potential danger.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I get that part.
spotlighting patrols, decoy sets, search warrants, those kind of things. We know that we're going to be interacting with, people that are out there purposely violating the law, and the degree of, the safety factor involved is something that we're, without some pretty high level permissions,
Yeah.
civilians are not going to be sitting on the hillside with us.
Well, give me your supervisor's number. I'll get some
Yeah.
permission. I'll buy the coffee, all that kind of stuff. But you know what struck me when you were talking about that, Steve, is the difference between game wardens and all other law enforcement agencies out there is you're dealing with people that you know for a fact are armed, right? There's they have a gun. You know it when you're dealing with these people, and I'm not saying the fly fishermen on the Boise River's armed. Not the case, obviously. I'm talking about hunters in general. That's got to be add a level of stress. Do you stress out about that kind of thing? Because you know these people are armed. They're out there. They're firing shots at night. They're poaching. They're doing this. What is going through their mind? Are they intoxicated? Are they on drugs? Are they just so psycho that you don't know what the outcome's going to be? What makes you the most nervous about your job?
So it's those what we have a lot of unknowns that we deal with, right?
Mm-hmm.
The times that I get nervous are those nighttime operations. Going into a camp at night because you got a call about a violation, and there's 6 guys in camp and they have been drinking. Search warrants are always super high level, high stress, right? Because we're going into somebody's house. We don't know what's in there.
Yeah.
They know every nook and cranny, and we have to serve the warrant by law. The judge has ordered us to do it. So those are the times that you, like you said earlier, you hope that the training that you have received and practiced and spent all that time working on is not needed.
Yeah.
But if it is needed, you've got it in your back pocket.
Yeah. That's a great way to put it. We don't want to pull out the chitty chitty bang bang, but if it comes down to chitty chitty bang bang, we're going to chitty chitty bang bang, right?
Yeah, you would be surprised at the number of fly fishermen that I've checked with a sidearm.
Well,
right?
I could see that in Idaho, people worrying about mountain lions and bears and all that kind of stuff. I'm always armed where I go, but there's bigger types of bears where I go fly fishing. Yeah. So,
Yeah, and that's one of the things that again, kind of getting into that misconceptions about people. Yes, there are times that I'm going to speak loud and clear and tell you exactly what you need to do.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm doing that because I don't want there to be any question about what you're doing and what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If I have to deal with somebody, with a violation, I don't know what their mentality is. I don't know, there's, all those stories about, you complete a traffic stop and you don't know when you walk up to that car if he just murdered his wife.
Exactly. That's crazy.
Is true. But there's one thing I know for certain as a game warden, most of the people that I interact with have at minimum one weapon on them.
Mm-hmm.
Fishermen have knives. Outdoorsmen have knives. I have a pocket knife everywhere I go.
Me too.
Right. So, even hikers during the summertime, a lot of times have a sidearm if they're in bear country or lion country. You go into a hunter camp, for certain everybody in that camp has at minimum one weapon with them.
Yeah.
And the way we train, if there's one, there's two. You always have to expect a second weapon, whether that be a knife, a box cutter, or a pistol or a rifle. There's one, there's always two.
I mean, even bear spray. You're hiking.
Absolutely.
There's hikers out there. Have you ever heard of a game warden getting sprayed with bear spray, purposely?
We not game warden specific, but we have had some wildlife law enforcement, Forest Service personnel that have been sprayed by pepper spray, bear spray, while conducting normal day-to-day business.
Oh man, that would hurt.
It's definitely something that we have to train for. We have to be ready for.
Yeah.
So getting back to the misconception part of it, folks will say, "Man, you're awful rude." It's like, well, I want to go home to my family tonight.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to make sure that you go home to your family tonight. So yes, I may have been a little bit stern, and I wanted everything to be very clear, but at the end of the day, I'm going home to my family, and I'm going to do anything I can to make sure that happens.
Yeah. And that's why I think more people should appreciate what you guys do, because that's on the line every day. So that's a good spot to segue. I sent you like a list of things, and one of the things that I was hoping to cover are like some personal on the job stories that you have that are particularly interesting or scary or emotional or really funny. I don't care which. But what would you say are some cool game warden stories that you have in your back pocket?
So I'll start off with one of the things that we as wardens, as wildlife professionals, and this definitely isn't a conservation officer specific topic, but one of the things that we get to participate in is youth hunts.
Mm-hmm.
and mentored hunts. And I've had a couple opportunities to mentor some kids, and those opportunities are special. They're, you take a kid who's never been hunting. This one little boy that I remember, a rough upbringing.
Mm-hmm. Yep, we all know him.
Got one parent at home. Mom doesn't know anything about hunting, but he's expressed some interest in it, and he took a hunter ed class and got signed up for a mentored hunt, and I was lucky enough to draw him in the hunt.
Nice.
And that hunt, it was an antlerless mule deer hunt. He's shooting he can only shoot a doe, but at the end of that hunt, you take the kid out, whether it's a boy or a girl. We take them out, we let them shoot the rifles, we let them get used to everything. We hike around, we look at the deer poo, we pick it up, we throw it at each other. We have the fun with it. And then, all right, tomorrow it's go time. We're gonna make this happen tomorrow.
Yeah.
And they show up, and their hair's all 6 ways from sideways, and they're barely functional, but they're there. And we hike out, we make our spot. We know, I had a spot where I knew some deer were coming from some ag fields up onto the BLM ground. Mm-hmm. And we went out and we made our set. We got shooting sticks ready. Life seems to be going pretty good. The sun starts to come up. The birds start to chirp, and it's just that experience, right? I could tell he's just taking it all in.
Gosh, Steve, I love where you're going with this, and I don't mean to cut you off. I just want you to know, like, if there is a program up in North Idaho that where kids like the boy you're describing need mentors, I want you to call me. I'd love to do it. Okay, carry on.
Yeah, so I got him on my left side, his mom sitting just right behind me on my right side, and a little group of deer start to feed out. Sun's up, we've seen him coming, and he waits and we wait, and a doe kind of separates from the group, and he makes the shot, and down she goes. She gets up and she runs just a little bit, and down she goes again. And
sweet.
That look on that young man's face is one of those days that I will never forget in my life.
Ah, man, that is powerful, man.
Oh yeah, it. I got the hairs on my arms are sticking up because he didn't care that it was a mule deer doe.
Yeah, yeah.
That to him was a 500-inch bull elk, right? It was everything that he had ever imagined, and it just happened. And we went through the process, and I showed him, how to gut it, and I helped him along the way, and I got ready to, to start dragging, and he asked if he could drag it, and by golly, that little boy almost got that deer all the way back to the road where we had started from.
Do you know how old he was?
He was 12.
Perfect. Gosh, that's perfect, man. Awesome.
And so those are, some of the feel good stuff that we get to do, every once in a while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love that. I love that story. And he got to keep all the meat, right?
He got all of it. Yep. He got all of it. We had butchers lined up for them to contact if they wanted to hire a butcher. And if they wanted to butcher the meat themselves, we had some of our Fish and Game volunteers that were going to help families butcher deer so that they learned how to do it if that's what they wanted to do.
I want to be on that list if there's a way. I just don't. Part of the problem with a lot of that stuff is we don't know where to search for that. Yeah, you know what I mean? I would totally butcher a deer's or a kid's deer if they needed it, so they didn't have to spend the money on a butcher. I would even pay a butcher fee. Those kind of things. I'd love to be involved if you guys have some way up, your connections up here in North Idaho. I'm here for you guys on that stuff.
Yeah. Oh, I appreciate that. And I'll definitely get you some information.
For sure.
Kind of along those same lines, Jim, to our sportsmen across the great state of Idaho, don't be afraid to reach out to your warden. Don't be afraid to learn and befriend the local conservation officer.
But Steve, how do they do that? That's, I think, the biggest hiccup is how do they do that? How do they reach out to a warden?
So a lot of times, honestly, I get most of those phone calls from non-residents.
Mm-hmm.
They're coming to Idaho and they want to learn more about Unit 50, which is where I live. On the resident side of things, I get those same phone calls, but a lot of times, it's related to, hey, I've never been there. I drew this elk tag. I drew this deer tag. What can you tell me? Those phone calls almost always come from my regional office. I'm of the opinion that the sportsmen and women of Idaho pay me to do what I love. And I am here as a customer service rep. I'm a customer service servant, if you will, because you guys pay my salary. So they call into the office. I have no qualms about people calling me on my cell phone. So the office knows they can call me. They call in, hey, I have a question about Unit 50. I have a bear baiting question. I have whatever. And the office just says, okay, yeah, we'll either take your name and number and have them get a hold of you, or, here's a cell phone number. Give him a call and ask him.
Sure.
And honestly, that's, we're literally one phone call away. Some of the folks that I've met in the field, just at random, have become, some pretty darn good friends.
I really appreciate that. I think that's important. I think that, one thing that I'm going to say to that point that you're making, Steve, is when we were talking a while back about, respect and manners and just being honest with your game warden and all that kind of stuff. One thing that I'll tell, especially my Idaho peeps, I know many of you are in Washington and Colorado and Arizona and Texas and all these areas where you guys are listening to the show at. And this is going to apply across the board, and this is coming from a guy who's spent a lot of time in a lot of different states hunting and fishing. So I can speak with some intelligence on that. But one thing that, like, having the manners and having the respect for your game warden and just knowing that they're out there doing their job, it's okay. Like, it's not offensive if they come up to you and ask about your fishing license or your hunting license. That's not an offensive thing. So don't get defensive. In fact, on the contrary, respond in a respectful and friendly way, because what happened to me one time is I got kind of pulled over because they knew that I was hunting, right? I wouldn't say I pulled over. There was a game warden coming down one way, and he kind of stopped, and I stopped, and I rolled down my window, and he rolled down his window. Anyway, the point being, I told him I was hunting, and he's like, would you mind if I checked license? Yeah, no problem. I get out. We start having a conversation. We start talking about all sorts of things, from raising kids to hunting is good here, fishing is great there. Well, at the end of the conversation, because we had this great conversation and we were super cordial and friendly with each other, he's like, hey, man, if you're serious about hunting mule deer, you're on the wrong road. If you go 2 roads over, you're going to have different results if you hike into this particular area. I am not saying that game wardens should provide hunting areas by any means, but what I am saying is, by having a little bit of politeness and manners and just some friendly, casual conversation with your game warden, they might get a soft spot for you. And since they're out there as a living in the woods, they might point you in the right direction every once in a while. But don't expect it, and don't ask for specific spots. That's my opinion, Steve. Am I off base?
No, not at all. Yeah, we're definitely not going to hotspot things. You know, we're not giving out honey holes. We're not giving out any super secret spots, because let's be honest, we talk to a lot of people that kill a lot of game, and it would just be 100% unprofessional to start sending, other people, hey, I just checked a guy with a giant bull. He was up on this ridge. Maybe you should head up there.
Yeah. That's not what I'm saying, and that's not what this guy did. He just let me know that generally mule deer were not in the drainage I was looking for, but they are in a different drainage, and I was polite, and he pointed me in the right direction. He didn't give me a specific spot.
Yeah, we don't hotspot things, but we've been doing this long enough. Most of us have been doing this long enough. You get a feel for people really fast, and those folks that are honest and cordial, and you can tell that they're out there, working their butt off, trying to provide meat for their family, having a good time, whatever it is, there's definitely a higher sense of help for those folks than, the guys and gals that, aren't as cordial, or, you always get the one. I kind of laugh about it, funny game warden stories. I can't tell you how many times I've been driving down a road and I stop my truck to look at a group of deer, and a vehicle pulls up behind me or pulls up nose to nose with me, and they jump out and they want to chat. And the first thing they say is, hey, have you seen any deer? Nope, haven't seen a single one.
Because they're not looking.
There they are on the hill 80 yards away from us, just standing there feeding, and it's like, wow, you guys aren't looking for anything that's not standing in the middle of the road.
I imagine as a game warden, you guys have a great eye for spotting game. And that's something I take a lot of pride in. I have a great eye, but I'll bet you guys have an even better eye. Like
we see a lot.
Yeah. You guys you're just out there every day, right? And so I always pride myself. Like my 10-year-old, she could spot a deer. Like there are grown men that would love to have the deer eye that my daughters have. It's amazing. But it's just it's just an interesting thing. The more time you spend doing it, But no, Steve, this has been a great conversation, man. I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing with us, your passion for what you do for a living, and sharing a lot of some of the inside details that I think a lot of people just don't have a lot of clarity on. I think that this is important stuff. It doesn't matter if you guys are in Idaho or if you're in whatever state, or up in some of the provinces in Canada. It doesn't matter. We're out there. We've got law enforcement, and the communication between the public and the law enforcement itself, I think, is super important. And also to the point of where Steve and I were talking about, helping our law enforcement and helping with regulation compliance and being the person that actually isn't a sissy about it. Like, you see somebody doing something wrong, you need to make it be known, because those are the things that are going to ruin it for the rest of us. So everybody out there that takes this lifestyle as a hunter serious, and we follow the rules, and we punch our tags, and we do all these things that are within compliance of what the laws and the regulations are, it's going to get ruined by people that don't do that. And it's a very small majority. And so I really appreciate this discussion, Steve. I think people are going to get a lot out of it. You got any closing thoughts or anything like that, or what? Where are we at?
So I've got one more funny story for you if you got a couple minutes.
Absolutely. I've got a few minutes, man. Send it.
And one kind of closing comment, I guess you would say, a lot of folks that hesitation to make the call. The way we tell folks is, if somebody came to your house and took your dog from your front yard, would you hesitate to call the cops? No, you're going to make that call immediately. But for some reason, when it's, a wildlife crime, they don't think about it as somebody just stole that deer from my family. And really, that's what's happening in these poaching events. Whether it's a native cutthroat trout or a mule deer doe or a bobcat or a bull elk, the wildlife belongs to the citizens of the state, and that wildlife belongs to you. And you should think of it as somebody is stealing from me as a sportsman, because that's truly what they're doing. They took that opportunity away from you and your family. And I like to try to clarify that with folks, because when a law is broken, a lot of times there's no, not a lot of times, there's never a hesitation to call the cops.
Mm-hmm.
But for some reason, when it comes to wildlife crime, oftentimes there's that hesitation.
That's a great point, Steve. That's a great point. Like, somebody's robbing a bank, everybody's calling 911, but somebody's poaching an elk, it's like, do I call? Do I call somebody?
Driving. Just keep driving.
Yeah.
And and that's one of the things that that I do try to drive home. Again, with our youth and the sporting groups that we talk to, and and we're just regular guys and gals out here doing a job.
Mm-hmm.
But we need the help from the public.
Yeah.
Citizens Against Poaching has been around for a long time. That phone number is on every hunting license or fishing license or tag that you ever buy.
Yep.
Make the call. It is so vitally important for us as wildlife enforcement professionals to be able to follow up on those violations, even if you think it's something that's so minor it doesn't matter. Those minor little calls, those minor little, I don't know, sometimes lead into something vastly more important.
That's what I was going to ask, Steve, is like, without being like a Karen or something, but sometimes you're out there and you're like, man, I don't know if that's legal. What is that guy doing? What is going on over there? It's like a question in your mind. Is that something that you should be like, okay, I'm just going to call the wardens and get some clarity on this as to what these people are doing, because I don't know if they're breaking the law, but they might be. It's not clear. Does that make sense? How do you advise with that?
Absolutely. What I tell folks is let me do my job.
When in doubt,
right?
Call the warden. Is that what you're saying?
That's right. It's not your job to know every law. It's not your job to know the intricacies of the law. If you see something fishy, you're like, oh man, that's just, that gut feeling that something's not right. I would rather you call me, call Citizens Against Poaching, call the local sheriff's office, mm-hmm. and report that, and let me do the follow-up and say, nope, everything was fine. than me to find out later in the season that I actually had witnesses to a crime and I got nobody to contact now.
Yeah. Yeah. Great point. I think that's the kind of stuff. Steve, I would love to have you, kind of in the future as like the go-to warden for the Western Huntsman platform. Does that make sense? Like if there's questions, I can call you up and we can kind of record real quick. What needs to be done or what needs to be said.
Sure.
And you're kind of like our foundation as far as law enforcement goes.
And I would have no problem with that at all. We tell folks all the time, I would rather every citizen of the state give me a call and say, hey, I don't really understand this, than me have to write somebody a ticket in the field.
Yeah.
That's
a tall order, man. There's like 2 million people in Idaho nowadays.
Oh, it's getting more and more, more and more every day.
Yeah.
But honestly, we're here for the sporting public of the state. It's much easier to get those clarifying questions, from the office, from one of us, than to go out into the field with an unknown in the back of your brain.
I had a game warden tell me one time, think about it this way. It's much easier and less inconvenient to spend 5 minutes clarifying a law or regulation versus 5 months dealing with the repercussions of breaking a law or regulation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You know what's funny? That particular game warden, so this is actually in North Carolina. He wanted to check my fishing license as I was pulling my boat out that was a rental boat from base, from Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. And I was kind of in the middle of just getting the boat on the trailer and pulling it out. And I'm like, okay, I'll meet you at the top of the ramp and show you my license. And because he was there, I felt like I was in a hurry, right? And I'm like, oh man, I don't want to let him down. I'm going to get to the top so I can get my license out because he, might think something's fishy. And so I didn't pay attention. So I pull the boat out. It's this 15, 16 foot fiberglass boat with a little 40 horsepower Mercury on the back. Pull the boat out, had bass in the live well, and the damn thing, it scooted as I was pulling off the ramp, and my whole boat came off the trailer and landed on the concrete of the ramp. And this warden was standing down there, and I thought he was going to have a heart attack. And so he helped me muscle the boat back up on the ramp, and I took it back to the rental place on base and didn't say anything about it.
Yeah.
Anyways, no, this is great stuff, Steve. I really appreciate you coming on the show. I know we're running a little long here. This has been just dynamite information. I think a lot of people are going to, just benefit from knowing, hearing from the game warden himself, and you're kind of echoing a lot of, I think, what a lot of game wardens, and I know this because I talk to a lot of game wardens, right? And so I think you're echoing just a lot of what people in your field they believe, and so people can really kind of get rid of some of the misconceptions and the misunderstandings and understand that what you guys do for a living is critical to our future as hunters and outdoorsmen and fishermen. I always leave out fishermen. And thanks again, not only for what you do, but thanks for coming on the show, man. This has been fun.
Yeah. It was exciting. I appreciate you reaching out to me.
Yeah.
And anytime I can talk warden talk a lot, as you have already found out. But,
oh man, you're giving me an idea. Maybe we do this once a quarter, like warden talk with the Western Huntsman. I love it, man. Thanks again. Stay safe. Don't hang up when I hit stop here, but just stay safe out there. And thanks again for what you do, and we'll be in touch soon.
Okay, sounds good, Jim. I appreciate it.
You made it all the way to the end. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. We sure appreciate your support. This is Jim Huntsman signing off and reminding you to check us out at Instagram at The Western Huntsman and on Facebook at The Western Huntsman. And you can also check out the website at thewesternhuntsman.com. Thanks again. We'll see you guys next time. Stay Western, and I'll see you on the mountain.